fabrications using fake accounts on Twitter to a political purpose, and it's not to help elect Democrats. And we don't want to talk about 4 years of Donald Trump manipulating the truth and trying to manipulate social media and threaten it, or directly to try to shape it by taking down content because it was critical of him personally. And that's what we ought to be talking about as we move forward, not the subject of today's hearing. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Donalds for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick, Mr. Roth.
Just 20 seconds. I'll maybe pose a quick question to Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, the opening statement, there's been a lot of talk about the memorandum from Attorney General Garland on October 21st, 2021. The opening statement, he says, the very first sentence, in recent months, there's been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, threats of violence against school administrators. And when he testified on October 21st, 2021, we asked him, what was the basis, what was the evidence for that statement? Do you remember what the Attorney General said?
Sir, I don't. I don't work for the Justice Department anymore. Didn't advise him on it.
Well, I'll remind you. He said it was the letter from the National School Boards Association. Now, do you happen to know what the National School Boards Association did with their letter, what they said about their letter after the Attorney General testified?
Sir, I do not.
They rescinded it. They said, we regret and apologize for the letter. So the basis for the targeting action involving the federal government and local school board matters, local law enforcement matters, the basis was the letter. That's what the Attorney General cited, and that letter has been pulled back, and the association who sent that letter said, we apologize and regret that we sent it. Seems to me the Attorney General should rescind his memorandum, which we've called for now for a year and a half.
Thank the chairman. Look forward, the Democrats tell us. Focus on the future. Might have started in a lab, might have happened in nature. But here's the question I keep coming up with. If it may have been a lab, may have been nature, we're supposed to look forward, then why did Dr. Fauci work so hard for just one of those theories? Why was it so important to push one over the other? Dr. Barra said, oh, we should entertain all hypotheses. Dr. Fauci had his hypothesis, how this started. We should entertain all of them. But that's not what happened. That is definitely not what happened. 3 years ago, if you thought it came from a lab, if you raised that, you were called a nut job. You got censored on Twitter. You were blacklisted on Twitter. You were even called a crackpot by the very scientist who in late January sent emails to Dr. Fauci and said it came from a lab. They called you crackpot. Is that right, Dr. Redfield?
I think the most upsetting thing to me was the Baltimore Sun calling me a racist because I said this came from a Wuhan lab.
Dr. Redfield, you ran the CDC and you were on the coronavirus task force. Is that right?
Correct.
That was formed on January 29th, 2020. Is that right?
Correct.
2 days later, Dr. Fauci gets an email from Dr. Anderson which says what? Virus looks engineered, virus not consistent with evolutionary theory. Is that accurate?
That's my understanding.
Next day, I know. Did he share that email with you, by the way, Dr. Redfield?
No.
As a member of the task force, as the head of CDC, did he share that email with you?
No.
Okay. Next day, February 1st, Dr. Gary sends Dr. Fauci another email. That email says, I don't know how this happens in nature, but it would be easy to do in a lab. Did he share that email with you, Dr. Redfield?
No.
You didn't see either one of those emails, even though you're head of CDC, even though you're on the coronavirus task force that had been formed just 3 days earlier.
No.
3 days later, Dr. Anderson and Dr. Gary, who told us it came from a lab in emails to Dr. Fauci that Dr. Fauci wouldn't let Dr. Redfield see, 3 days later, they changed their position 180 degrees. The question is why? Mr. Wade, why would they change their position that fast when the only intervening event is a conference call with Dr. Fauci, the guy who wouldn't let Dr. Redfield see the very emails that they had sent him, Dr. Redfield, head of CDC on the coronavirus task force? Why would they change their position, Dr. Wade, or Mr. Wade?
Well, this question does lie at the heart of the issue. What is pertinent, it seems to me, is there's no new scientific evidence that we can see that became available between these days.